Hello, everyone, and welcome to the sixth and final session in American English Live Teacher Development Series 7. My name is Lauren, and I'll be with you today along with my colleague behind the scenes, Amy, who will be serving as moderator to help answer your questions and respond to your comments during the session. Today, our host, Kate, will be talking with our presenter, Chris Stillwell, about techniques for expanding your professional networks both inside and outside of your schools and institutions. So let's get started.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're so happy to see each and every one of you here today. My name is Kate, as Lauren said, and I will be your host for today's session. We're so happy that all of you can be here. As you can see today, I am home. A lot of us at the Office of English Language Programs at the U.S. Department of State have been home these days, as I know many of you have as well. And we want you to know that we are here with you, and we're so happy that we can be here together virtually online. All right, so let's begin with this fun photo featuring viewing groups from Sudan and the Philippines. We love to see our teacher participants actively engaged in professional development, and we encourage you to continue to engage with your community virtually like we're engaging with you right now. We love this community because even though we are a global teacher force attending from around the world, we feel very connected to you in the chat box and our social media channels. So please continue to participate with us and share your photos from American English Live sessions by emailing them to americanenglishwebinars@fhi360.org or by sharing them on social media. Often we ask for viewing group photos, and we're happy to still receive those from other sessions or previous sessions, but you can also take a selfie or take a photo of a group chat or something like that. We'd love to see it. So please, please, please share your wonderful photos. We will be happy to receive them. All right, today is our last session in American English Live Teacher Development Series 7. We've explored sessions related to the themes of foundations of TESOL methodology, curriculum design and course development, and teachers working together. We hope you've been able to use the practical ideas we share, and let us know if you had a favorite session in the comments or the chat. So here's what to expect today. Each session is about 60 minutes long and is often related to an American English e-teacher massive open online course or to a Teacher's Corner theme on the American English website. The presenter will present the material, and I, as your host, will ask questions and make comments as well. But we really hope to hear from you, our audience, so that we can address all of your great experiences, questions, and ideas. So please, please share your thoughts in the comments and the chat. When our session comes to a close in about an hour, you'll have an opportunity to receive a digital badge for your participation. At the end of the session, we'll share a link in the comments and at the top of this post. Click on that link and complete a short quiz about today's session. You must answer 2 out of 3 questions correctly in order to receive your digital badge. And once you've done so, you should expect to receive that badge via email within about a week. And for those of you who attended 4 out of 6 sessions, your regional English language office will be in touch with you in the next few weeks about those certificates. And finally, the thing that I am most excited about today is that we want to share with you the American English Live Teacher Development Series 8 schedule. So we are excited to begin on May 6th with another series of wonderful webinars. We will explore teaching reading in the English as a foreign language classroom, communicative language teaching, and pair work and group work to encourage student-to-student interaction. So you can see there is a registration link there if you'd like to be on our list to receive email reminders, which can be really helpful. Please sign up, and we will make sure to communicate all of the exciting details about the next webinar series coming up. All right, and now for today's session, Connecting to Learn, Growing Professionally Through Teacher-to-Teacher Engagement. Think about the best teaching strategies you have ever learned. Did you learn them from another teacher? Connecting and conversing with peers can offer teachers great opportunities for professional growth. This session will explore how to expand our professional networks to build community both inside and outside of our schools and institutions. We will also share ways to foster inspiring conversations with colleagues during such activities as reading discussions and lesson shares. And we'll examine ways of making the most of faculty meetings and professional conferences. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter today, Christopher Stillwell. Dr. Christopher Stillwell has taught English as a second or foreign language in Spain, Japan, and the US, and has worked as a teacher educator in such places as Egypt, Peru, and Laos. He's edited 2 books for the TESOL International Association on language teaching insights from other fields. Currently, he's an instructor and advisory board member for University of California, Irvine's online TESOL certificate program, and he is a professor of ESL at College of the Sequoias. Welcome, Chris. We're so happy to have you here with us today.
Good morning, Kate. I'm very happy to be here as well. Thank you. So as you said, we're going to talk about connecting to learn, growing professionally through teacher-to-teacher engagement. And so the first thing I want to say is thank you. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to join this session. If you're interested in this session, I imagine you're someone who cares about being an effective and valuable colleague and a teacher, of course. Your schools should be grateful for your commitment. I'm glad to be with you for this hour. On the next slide, we have a roadmap of what we're going to talk about today. The first topic is teacher-to-teacher engagement. What is it? We'll talk about connecting with other teachers, why we should do it, and how we can. We'll talk about how to learn from other teachers, and we'll talk about practical applications. So let's focus on that first one. What is teacher-to-teacher engagement and connection? Well, when we refer to teacher-to-teacher engagement and connection, we are referring to teachers getting to know one another, sharing ideas, resources, and information, and providing support. Teachers can learn a great deal from and with other teachers through this kind of engagement. At the start, it involves teachers gathering together to explore a topic. They could follow a formal and structured format, or it could be informal and unstructured. They could meet face-to-face, or they could interact online. And if they're online, they could engage with one another at the same time, synchronously, or at different times when they're available to catch up and contribute asynchronously. Now, the next topic is about connecting with other teachers. And the question is, why? And that's a question I'd like to ask to you, actually. So can you tell us, why is it important to connect with other teachers?
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you, everybody. What do you think? What are your ideas about the importance of connecting with other teachers? Why is it important to connect with other teachers? Let's see. Mia says to have more inspiration. Great response. Let's see. Idea sharing from Lei. Wonderful. Learning from each other. Because of the students. That's a great response from Yulin. Yeah, we want to have some better ideas and better strategies so that we can help our students learn even better. Wonderful. Sharing our opinions, seeking support. Vera says exchanging ideas. Sharing knowledge and expertise from Kinda. For professional development. Oh my gosh, so many wonderful responses. I hardly can read all of them. So thanks so much for sharing, everybody.
That's fantastic, yes. So I think everybody has hit on the main idea, and that is there are a million reasons for teachers to connect and get to know one another. A few ideas that I think of when I think about this are that it allows for professional growth and learning. It increases access to opportunities of all kinds. If we think back to the start of civilization, humans have benefited from hunting together, sharing food, and fighting off common enemies. Yet learning through interaction is the same thing that our students do. So when we do it with other teachers, we learn with colleagues, and we also learn about this experience of how to learn through talking to other people. So this also makes us better teachers when we try it in our classes. We also know that relationships are associated with happiness. They seem to be a key to happiness and mental health. Those who have lots of relationships tend to be happy. They tend to be healthy. They even tend to live longer. Another thing is it provides ways to help others, which is great in 2 ways. As we help others, we help ourselves as we get deeper feelings of personal fulfillment. And the last one on my list here is it helps teachers deal with burnout and other problems we may have, because we can find social support in times of difficulty. But as all of you said, there are many other reasons as well. So let's go to the next topic, which is how. How can we connect with other teachers? And we'll see that there are two main things that we're going to focus on here. The first one is getting teachers together, and the second one is cultivating your teacher network. Now, for that first topic of getting teachers together, the first thing we're going to talk about there is the value of specifying a goal and a matching activity. We'll talk about how it can be useful to distribute responsibility, but also it can be useful to be a leader as well. And that's kind of a tension that's interesting and, well, useful. And the last one is it's good to remove obstacles. So let's go to that first point about specifying a goal and finding a matching activity. So like we said, there's probably a million different ways that we can benefit. There's also a million different ways that teachers can get together and learn from each other. So to narrow your choices, it's good to first define your goals and choose a corresponding activity. You might want to talk to people that you think would be interested in joining you for an activity. Find out what they're interested in. Do they want to read articles? Do they want to visit a classroom and observe a teacher? Do they want to improve the curriculum? Try to select a goal that your colleagues will be eager to participate in. That's a good start. So we might try to connect and learn, just strengthen through collaboration. Or we might make specific improvements to our teaching or our curriculum or our school. Once we've got a good goal, we want to find a matching activity. Now, some possible activities include things we will talk about today. The AE Live viewing party. Hey, that sounds good. Lunch and Learn is another one. Group problem solving, reading discussion group, peer observation, and lesson study. We'll talk about all of these a bit more as we go forward in today's session. But whatever your goal is, it's useful to distribute responsibility. The idea here is try to find collaborators who will share the responsibility for planning. Maybe you can distribute the topic selection and the discussion leadership to different members each time. The benefits, if you can share this kind of responsibility, is that it makes the activity more sustainable because more people are invested in keeping things going. And if one person gets busy, then someone else can take over. The bottom line is more people feel ownership, they care about it, and they want to keep it going. But while it's good to have distributed responsibility, it's also good to often have one person who is kind of in charge behind the scenes, doing a little bit of extra work to make sure it happens. And that's the next one, that's be a leader. A leader does many crucial things to help teachers connect and learn, such as taking care of details like finding a place to meet, could be in person or it could be online, setting a schedule, establishing a routine. This person might be the one who talks to administration. Maybe they ask for teachers to get time off for a meeting at some point, or maybe they ask the school to give some support, some funding for food and resources. Now, another way to prepare is to think about the things that might prevent teachers from participating. That's something a leader or a bunch of leaders might think about as well. And what we're talking about here is removing obstacles. Sometimes teachers are eager to get together with their colleagues to collaborate and learn, but obstacles like time, hunger, and disconnection can get in the way. Leaders can look for ways to address these obstacles and increase teachers' participation. So I'm going to look at each of these obstacles one by one and talk about how it could be a problem, and then give an example of a possible solution. The first one is time. I think everybody knows teachers are extremely busy. As a matter of fact, I'm quite surprised that you're here with us right now. Where did you find the time? Well, I'm glad you did. But if a meeting requires a lot of preparation, teachers may not be able to participate. So to address this problem, we might want to consider ways teachers can learn together without doing a great deal of preparation. The key is to keep it simple. So on the next slide, we see that one possibility is an AE Live viewing party. So the way this works is very simply, you can join an online discussion before the event. There's no preparation, you just jump in. You can look at the suggested readings if you have time. If you didn't have time, it's okay. You jump into the session. But when it comes to the session, you can organize an in-person or a virtual viewing party. So you could be texting to your neighbors on your phone or something while you're watching, or you could be in the same room, depending on the situation and your resources. You can also organize a discussion after the session, using the discussion questions that are provided at the end of the session. So I have a question. Are any of you watching this presentation together with other teachers that you're communicating with right now, maybe through texting or maybe in the same room? If so, can you tell us, how do you benefit from watching with other colleagues?
All right, great question. So I think a lot of us may be watching from home, but maybe you're chatting with other people. Maybe you're sharing ideas through WhatsApp. Maybe you're on right here, just sharing your ideas in the chat. What do you think about watching with other people, whether it's virtually or in person? How does that benefit when you are able to watch in a group, professional development activities or other things like that? So what do you think, everybody? Nurka says you can share everything. We can discuss everything afterwards with colleagues. So maybe you can chat on WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger or another platform. You can share and discuss. Maybe an idea is something, an idea that a colleague shares, maybe we'll elaborate a little bit on something that the presenter shared. And you can share experiences and exchange ideas afterwards. So wonderful, that's great. And as a reminder, everybody, we have all of the materials that are for this webinar on our Ning, AmericanEnglishWebinars.com, if our moderators wouldn't mind putting that link in the chat box. And we also have a discussion board there on our Ning. But we want you to also please feel free to continue to share your wonderful ideas on Facebook and Zoom as well, and on other platforms that your regional English language officer might be encouraging you to join. So yeah, wonderful ideas, everybody. Thanks so much for sharing.
That's great. Yes, thank you. I'm seeing that people are talking about using particular platforms like WeChat or Line and things like that as well. So that's excellent. So this is the first obstacle we're talking about, time, and how when we keep it simple, it's easy for teachers to get together and learn together. The next obstacle that we can talk about is hunger. Now, hunger can be an obstacle at times. If you schedule a face-to-face meeting during a break time when teachers have a rare chance to get something to eat, you might put them in an uncomfortable position of having to decide whether to feed their stomachs or feed their minds. If they do choose to come instead of eating, they may find it difficult to concentrate. So one solution is to avoid putting teachers in that position. Instead, if you can, it's great to offer snacks at your meeting or encourage everyone to bring something to share. In my experience, this is something that teachers really appreciate. Now, this leads into another kind of a solution. It's a special kind of teacher collaborative learning activity called Lunch and Learn. It's also known as instructional idea exchange or show and tell. It can take many different forms, but the basic format is quite simple. It's about sharing your lunch break with other teachers. Now, as we break bread together, it can help us build connection and relationships with our fellow teachers. And as we eat together, we can discuss particular topics. The topic can be simple. We can keep to that first principle of being simple and having minimal preparation if that's what we want. We can just talk about our favorite lesson ideas. We can talk about things learned at a recent conference or a teacher meeting. We can talk about a short article. Now, notice that I've kept these suggestions to kind of positive ideas because sometimes teachers might start to complain about a student or complain about a problem, and the conversation might turn a little bit negative. And that's fine and useful sometimes. But I think it's really good to have a good way to steer the conversation to solutions and constructive opportunities together. And so that's why I mentioned the 3 ideas here. Now, the last obstacle that I'd like to talk about is disconnection. Despite all the valuable things that teachers can learn from one another, teaching is said to be an egg carton profession because of the way teachers tend to be isolated from one another as they work in their separate classrooms. If teachers do not find ways to fight this isolation, teachers may also feel uncomfortable about discussing their teaching practices and participating in activities with colleagues. One solution is to work on this and really try to build community. If we make efforts to build community and camaraderie among colleagues, we'll address these problems. So how do we do that? One idea is to include everyone, right? So give everyone in our group, in our school, in our network, individual attention. Make sure that everyone knows that their presence is valued, even in the way that we get the word out. Instead of sending a blanket email to everyone we know, send individual email invitations. The more personal it is, the more likely people are to recognize that you care, and the more likely they are to respond and take your meeting seriously. Another thing we can do is use icebreaker activities. much like the ones that we might use in our classes in our early days when we're trying to help everyone get to know one another. It could be something simple like ask everyone to bring in an object and tell us why that object is important to them. That's one of my favorite activities. And tell a story about it. Okay, the next one is celebrating what makes the group valuable. It's good to recognize the value that you get from meeting with the group and the unique contributions that everyone makes. Call attention to any accomplishments that the group makes. The last one here is foster feelings of safety and acceptance. And we can do this through all of the above activities and by collaboratively developing ground rules for participation and respectful disagreements. Maybe we have rules like this in our classes, but we can also develop these with our colleagues before we start our sessions. Now, in addition to these steps that we can take to build community within an existing group, we can also make steps by making an effort to expand our personal network of the teachers that we would like to collaborate with and learn from. So that's the second point in this section. It's about cultivating your network. And this brings us to another question for you. The question is, what actions might you take to build your network?
Great. So we've had some really nice comments. And so everyone, please feel free to answer this question. What actions might you take to build your network? And while we're waiting for your wonderful responses to this question, we have some other great comments. So JP Lopo, hello, how are you? He says, this part of the session or this session reinforces what we learned last time in our webinar about communities of practice. So thanks for that comment. Let's see, some other folks wrote some great ideas about food because we all know how important food is. Let's see, Christian says, we love feeding both our mind and our stomach, which is a great response. Thanks for sharing that. And let's see, Vasconcelos says that they make a small money contribution and then one of the teachers in the group prepares food that based on the money that everybody gave for that. So that's a great way as well to build community. Wonderful. So let's see. So Woojan Lin says that she joins different WeChat groups where teachers gather together and share views and resources. Wonderful. Tong says that they have a book club. Wonderful. Excellent idea. Huai says that you can invite people with the same interests as you to build your network. I think that's another great idea. Raquel says creating WhatsApp groups. Great idea. To share ideas and thoughts and inspiration. Wonderful. Let's see. Jolif says we're doing the learning action cell in our school twice a month. So I assume that's sort of like a little group where you learn something and then maybe take action on it. Let's see what else. And meetups and creating social media platforms from Javed. So many wonderful ideas, everybody. Thank you so much for your comments and for sharing.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I love to hear the different possibilities. And again, I do hear a connection to the idea of a community of practice that was discussed in the last session. Great. So on the next slide, it says that we're going to break this down into two basic topics. The first one is be interested in people. And the second one is appreciate your existing network. So I'd like to start that first topic with a quote, kind of a famous quote. And it says, you can make more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in other people than you can in 2 years by trying to get other people interested in you. That's from a famous book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. Now, what are we talking about here? For me, it's about nurturing our interest in people and the value of that. It's something that comes quite naturally to many of us. So the first point here would be that it's useful to learn about other people. So if you think about your classes, we might often begin our classes with icebreakers, right? Maybe right at the beginning of class, we throw out a question for everyone to discuss. And that's something that we do naturally when we're interested in other people also. We start with a question. We want to learn about them. So we ask them things. Now, if you're shy about it, because maybe you're trying to start a network with people you don't really know well, maybe they're different from you in some ways and you just haven't established any relationship at all yet, it's a good idea to have icebreaker questions at the ready to help you begin the conversation and get to know people. Kate, do you have any icebreaker questions you use? Like if you're at a conference maybe and there are other people around that you want to strike up a conversation with?
Yeah. Yeah, I like to have some ideas in mind about what I can chat with when I'm networking with other people. So I often think one of my main questions is, where do you teach and what level or in what context? So I might ask like what school or what state or that kind of thing if I'm at a national conference here in the US. And I might ask about the levels or maybe about how long somebody's been teaching, something like that.
That's great. Yeah. Just those kinds of questions about what the teacher does can help you find out quickly where you connect, where you overlap, and what you might talk about next. When I'm at a conference, I like to ask those kinds of questions too. And if I see someone that maybe I've already met before but haven't talked to in a long time, I might also ask something like a question kind of like what's new, but more specifically, what are you excited about nowadays? And very often I'll hear from someone about an exciting session that they went to or a new book they saw in an exhibitor area, things like that. And that gives me more ideas. That helps me build my professional repertoire as well. So thank you. The next one there is help. And the idea here is as we learn about other people, we might look for ways that we can help them. Maybe you know the expression, a friend in need is a friend indeed. So when colleagues are busy, we can offer to help them. When we meet someone new, we can listen closely and think about if we know any resources. And if we have someone new joining our school, that's a great time to be a cultural informant, someone who can answer questions and provide recommendations, someone who can explain the way things work at your school. The last point here is about being a fan. And this is one of my favorites. The idea here is if you appreciate someone for something, don't be shy about expressing that. If someone does something you admire, then tell them. You can do it face to face. You can send an email. You can send a letter. And this can happen with people from your school. Or maybe you read something that somebody wrote that you never met before, but you can send them an email and say that you really liked what they wrote. For example, here I am, and I'm working with the American English Live team. And it's my second time working with them. And I'm really a big fan, actually. I'm very impressed with what they share with teachers around the world. And I can't imagine a more positive and pleasant team to work with behind the scenes. So I appreciate you.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much, Chris. And we appreciate you and all of our wonderful presenters. And of course, we really appreciate our audience as well. So thank you. Yeah, I'm a fan of our presenters. I'm a fan of our audience. We're so thankful for this community.
Absolutely. Thanks. Great. So one more point to think about when we're building our network is that we can try to appreciate our existing network, both within and beyond that egg carton that teachers tend to be in. So as we cultivate our network, we can try to appreciate the people that we already know. Consider the network we've already developed, perhaps without realizing it. So think about your coworkers, your current coworkers, obviously, but what about your former coworkers? Celebrate the diversity of people in your group that you're connected to. Note the strengths and the unique perspectives they bring, from the young teachers who may be more in touch with perspectives of a student, and the new teachers who see things with fresh eyes. Also think about those experienced teachers who share the wisdom, right? We can also think about fellow students. And what I mean here is that many of us were in a teacher preparation program of some sort. And when we were in that program, we were alongside other people who were becoming teachers or becoming better teachers at the same time. Well, they can be part of our network too, of course. And what about those former teachers that we had when we were a student? Certainly teachers when we were in a teacher preparation program, but even going back to our childhood. All of these people can be members of our professional network if we can find ways to connect with them. They can bring us different perspectives, new ideas, useful information, and inspiration. Okay, so let's say that we figured out a way to bring all these different people together. Maybe it's face-to-face, maybe it's online through a virtual platform. But the next question is, what do we do? How do we get together and how do we learn from other teachers? Well, I'm sure that many of you have some ideas about this as well. So that's the next question for you. How do you learn from other teachers?
All right, great question. What do you think, everybody? How do you learn from other teachers? And thank you so much for all the wonderful, nice shout outs as we're waiting. Lots of people saying, excellent class. We're so happy to be here. Things like that. Christopher,
Wow.
you look cool.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's a good. So things are going great. All right, let's see. How do we learn from other teachers? By observing their classes. Wonderful.
Wow, great.
Speaking with other teachers, discussions, workshops, interviews, sharing experiences, Pima says observing their classroom by sharing experience. Yeah, wonderful ideas. Asking questions. That's a great one, Sarah. And one that we often forget. Just ask questions. Maybe just go to another teacher and say, hey, I'm not sure how to do this. What do you do? That can be such a simple way to learn. Asking about their experience and sitting in on their lessons from Diamond. So wonderful, great responses, everybody. Please keep your comments and questions coming.
Excellent. Yes, I love the idea of asking questions. It makes me think, a friend of mine used to tell me that it's about a saying that he knew. Something like asking a question might bring a moment's embarrassment. Maybe we feel awkward about asking questions sometimes, but not asking a question can bring a lifetime of regret. Maybe some of you are familiar with that expression already. And I think that's a good one to keep in mind. So yeah, don't be shy, ask a question. I'm also thrilled to see so many of you talking about observing classes. That is something that we're going to talk about shortly. So okay, let's go on and talk about how to learn from and with other teachers. Now, I think first of all, to a large extent, teachers naturally learn from one another when they get together and just talk about teaching. It just happens. But there are some activities we can participate in to make this kind of gathering and learning happen. And you can see 4 of them here. The first one is to collaborate. The second is to discuss inclusively. Third is visit a classroom. Many of you said the same thing when you said observe a classroom. And the last one is seize opportunities. Okay, let's take a look at that first one, collaborate. Now, one way to think about this is that all shared projects are learning opportunities. Teachers naturally learn with one another when they take on projects together. It could be norming for a test. It could be developing curriculum, or maybe you're planning an event. Whatever you're doing, chances are that if you're together with other teachers, you're naturally going to talk about things that are useful to you and help you learn. In addition, we can also be more specific and more focused about it. We can use the same kinds of formal collaborative learning activities that we use in our classrooms, such as group projects and jigsaw activities. These kinds of activities can draw out and help us learn from the different kinds of expertise that our colleagues have. These activities allow us to enhance our social relationships. We can learn through interaction and share knowledge. Let's, in a few minutes, we're going to look at some specific activities for collaboration. But right now, let's go to the next point, which is about using inclusive discussion practices. Now, this is one of my favorite points because it's really good for working with other teachers, but it's also really good for our classroom. When we lead discussions in our classroom, there are some techniques that help us make sure that all students are able to participate, right? When we are teaching, we might find that there's 1 or 2 students who always have their hand up and they're always ready to answer a question. And it's easy for us as the teachers to maybe always call on that same person. But if we do, we are leaving out a lot of people in our class. And the same thing can happen with teachers when they get together. There might be one teacher who's very confident, maybe very experienced, maybe will talk a lot about their experiences, which is wonderful, but we want to make sure to hear from everyone and get participation from all so that we all learn something from each other. So the first point here is don't call on the first volunteer, right? We might wait. Sometimes teachers might pose a question and pause for 5 or 10 seconds before they call on anyone. And that something similar can happen in our teacher groups. We might split up a question so that more than one person can contribute to the answer. We might ask someone to tell us the answer to the first part. And can I get someone to maybe repeat what you just heard and tell me more? That's something we might do with our students. We could try it with other teachers. And that leads to the next point there, which is avoiding closure, right? If one person tells us an answer that is a possibly correct answer, maybe don't say right away, that's right. Maybe stay away from that. Instead, keep it open-ended and allow for exploration of different perspectives. Maybe they have a good answer, but maybe there are more good answers. Let's see. So the point here is we want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to come up with a response to a discussion. So another possibility is that last one on the slide. We can use think, write, and pair share. We might invite students to think for a moment and write an answer in their notes before they talk to a neighbor, and then share with the class at large. And of course, that is something we can do in our classes. When I was studying for my PhD, I had a class in statistics, and I remember the professor was really great. And sometimes he would stop and he would say, "Are there any questions?" And he would wait for maybe 5 or 6 seconds, which is a good teaching practice. But actually, for me, I needed a little bit more time. So what was even better for me was when he did something similar, when he said, "Here's a question for you guys. Take a moment and think about it, and then we'll come back." And maybe after a moment, he said, "You know what? Don't tell me your answer. Tell your neighbor." Teachers can do the same thing, right? We can invite teachers to talk to each other about a question before they share with the whole group. And all of these kinds of techniques are ways that we can facilitate learning among teachers and get perspectives from everyone in the group. Kate, can you think of anything else to add about this inclusive discussion practices? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, not at all. No, I think that all of these are really great ideas. And something that I think a lot of us are thinking about is even in our teacher discussion groups or our teacher community groups, we can practice certain strategies that might also be really helpful in our classrooms. And sometimes when we ask teachers to participate in the same types of activities that our students will do, those are enhanced as well. So yeah, I really love the idea of having think, pair, share or think, write, pair, share. And I also like the idea of waiting and making sure that lots of different people have the opportunity to speak up, because that's a great practice for our classroom as well.
Thanks, Kate. And something you just mentioned there is a really nice point as well. And that is, very often when teachers get together to talk about teaching, we find it useful to use these same kinds of practices that we have in our classes. And it reminds me of an idea of synchrony. There are some studies about happiness, and it turns out that people in a chorus find happiness from that kind of synchronization of singing a song together. And so, Kate, when you said that we can use things that we use in our classrooms with other teachers, you made me think of that idea. You made me remember how sometimes at a conference, maybe there's a workshop where the presenter will ask everyone to do an activity that's very similar to what students do in our classrooms. And it seems to me that the teachers really relish those moments. It seems like it's a really nice moment where all the teachers understand what's going on here, but they're experiencing it, and they're connecting on kind of a different level. So I wonder if that's a similar kind of experience of synchrony and kind of happiness. So yeah,
Definitely.
Thanks, Kate. So the next point that I wanted to talk about here about learning from other teachers is perhaps the most popular point for everyone joining us today. I saw it mentioned so many times. I was really thrilled. It's visit a classroom. Yes, we can learn a lot about teaching from talking about it. Yes, we can learn a lot about teaching from reading about it with our colleagues, but there's really nothing quite like seeing it firsthand. So classroom observation is what we're talking about. Now, when we talk about classroom observation, it sounds like we have a lot of agreement that it's a great way for us to learn when we observe a teacher. But I have another question for you. How do you feel if you are the teacher and someone is observing you? How do you feel about being observed?
Yeah, what do you think, everybody? How do you feel when someone observes your classroom? And just want to say as well, during this time, it might also be a great idea to observe a virtual classroom. So if you're one of your colleagues has a lot of experience with online teaching or something like that, you can maybe ask if you can take a look at their course or audit their course or watch them when they present, something like this. But how do you feel about being observed? Let's see. Oh, someone says, I feel confident. That's great. I usually personally feel kind of nervous. Motivated, wonderful, from Alexandria. Not natural at all from Mai. So when someone observes your class, they don't feel very natural. Let's see, King says, it's a good opportunity to get feedback. Let's see, some people feel self-conscious from Tahsina. Very interesting point, definitely. Raquel says nervous. Sarah says she enjoys it. Wonderful. Another thing let's see, I do really good preparedness from Aiden. That's what I was going to mention. A lot of times when teaching, if someone's watching me, I usually prepare maybe even a little more than I do when someone is not, which actually helps me to develop better lessons. So yeah, wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing, everybody.
Fantastic. Yes, I'm really, really enjoyed seeing your responses here. What I notice is I see two different kinds of responses as well. I see people talking about feelings of nervousness and self-consciousness, very unnatural sometimes. And that's true. It's not uncommon for teachers to feel a bit uncomfortable about having someone come to their class and observe their teaching. But there are many benefits. And I was so happy to hear so many benefits expressed. People feeling excited and motivated about it. Seeing it as an opportunity for feedback. I saw one of you said showing time, and you made me remember an old colleague who called it the opportunity for their backflip lesson, which is like showing off, look what I can do. And that can happen sometimes, for sure. But another way to think about this observation is that it doesn't necessarily have to be about the teacher. It doesn't necessarily have to be about judging whether the teacher is doing a good job or what they do well, what they can fix. There's another way to look at it, well, many other ways. Here's one more on the next slide. It's a quote. It says, "Seeing you allows me to see myself differently and to explore variables we both use." Now, I really like this quote for the way it supports an idea of collaboration with the observer. So maybe I'm the teacher, maybe you visit my class, but when we finish, it's not going to necessarily be all about me as the teacher. We can talk about the things that we share. Maybe you'll say, "Chris, I noticed that you had a special way of passing out papers to the students to try to keep things on time, and I do something similar." And then we can have a conversation about that, right? So the idea here is it can be about a shared exploration. Now, another special way to have a shared exploration is lesson study. So stay tuned, don't go anywhere. We're going to talk about that one in a few moments as well. Okay, so moving on for the moment, away from classroom observation, I want to talk about seizing existing opportunities. The idea here is that we can look for opportunities that are already around us, and we can see how they are chances for us to learn from colleagues on informal occasions. The first thing is we can make a point to be where people are. We might recognize that the teachers in our school tend to congregate in a particular place. If you have a teacher's room, maybe they're there. Maybe they're in the lobby, the language center, the library, the coffee shop. I don't know. But wherever you see that your colleagues tend to spend time, that's a good place for you to go and just sit around while you're grading papers or something like that. And that's how you create some opportunities to connect with other people in your school. Another idea is that we could do this virtually, right? We can join a group that's online and just try to be there and interact with other people. We have opportunities like educator groups on social media, like this one, AE Live. Now, when we join conference presentations and workshops and webinars and faculty meetings, it's also good to remember that we have fantastic opportunities to learn, not just from the people who are talking at the front of the room, but from the people who are sitting next to us, right? So if you come only for the meeting, for the webinar or workshop or whatever, you're missing opportunities for networking and learning. That's why we have the second point here. Arrive early and stay late. It gives you a chance to interact with other teachers outside of the main program. And chances are, remember, that the teachers who go to the same meetings as you have a lot of the same interests. So you should have a lot to talk about. The last point here is be active. Look for opportunities to contribute and help wherever you are. If you're in a workshop or a webinar, jump in there. If it's a faculty meeting, also jump in there with comments and contributions. This is a great way for people to get to know you as someone they trust and value. And I think I failed to mention faculty meetings. Sometimes faculty meetings get kind of a bad reputation. But if we think about it, this is a great occasion to spend time with colleagues as well, especially if you arrive early, stay late, and be active. All right. So in the last big section of our presentation today, I want to talk about some practical applications. Let's look at some examples of collaborative activities that teachers can do to get to know one another, build their network, and learn from and with one another. So we're going to talk about 3 kinds of activities that help us connect with other teachers and learn. You can see the first one on the next slide is group problem solving. The second one is jigsaw activities. And the third one, as I promised earlier, is lesson study. So let's go to that first idea. And Kate, I hope you can work with me on this to maybe give an example of group problem solving. Okay, so for group problem solving, let's imagine, I'll tell you a quick little story actually. So a while back, I was at a session in Laos, and I was invited to talk about some kind of professional development with reading discussions. And when I first got to see the teachers, I found out that they actually weren't very interested in that topic. So I was in big trouble. I was supposed to be an expert, ready to talk about something useful for the teachers, and they weren't interested in my topic. So I started to think, well, how can we find a topic that will be useful for the teachers? How can we find something that everybody wants to talk about and learn from? And so that's where I first tried out this idea. It's group problem solving. And you'll see this idea expressed in many different ways in different places. But the first idea here is you begin with an open question. For example, we might ask something like, what are some issues that students raised in the last survey that we gave them about their satisfaction with the school? Or we might ask them a question like, what are some common classroom challenges we encounter in the classroom? So once we have this question that seems like a good one for everyone in our group, something that's easy to jump in and give lots of answers, well, let's do exactly that. You jump in next and you brainstorm. You brainstorm a long list of ideas. And as you brainstorm, you of course remember the rules of brainstorming. Maybe you're familiar with these rules. The first one I can think of is that all ideas are okay at first. It's okay to repeat ideas because all ideas are okay. Oh, by the way, it's okay to repeat ideas. Another thing is it's okay to build off of other people's ideas. You can take somebody else's idea and give it a new spin. The main thing is get some momentum going and keep the conversation going with lots of ideas. And so in this case, if we're writing on the board, we could put some things up there. Kate, what are some things that you think teachers might put up there if we're talking about common challenges in the classroom?
Good question. Let's see, common challenges in the classroom. I would say a lot of people deal with very large class sizes. So trying to differentiate or address everyone's needs if you have lots and lots of students in your classroom.
Okay.
We've mentioned time. Oh, okay, that's it. Yep.
No.
Time is another one. Time in general, trying to put all of your curriculum within a short amount of time, or for students of varying levels, things like that.
Thank you. Great. Yeah. And so the idea here is Kate is kind of being like one of the teachers in this kind of session. And I'm hearing from Kate, and I would write these ideas on the board as we go. I see Huawei wrote class management as another idea. So these are the kinds of things that go on the board as we're brainstorming. And we make a big, long list of everything we can think of. Lack of time, assessment in large classes, engagement in multi-level classes, classroom management. They're all there, right? And probably a bunch more. I'm sorry to tell you, but there are more than 4 challenges in the classroom. Once we have a long list of these challenges, we need to narrow it down because we're not going to fix all the problems in the world in one session. So the next thing to do is to have a vote on the most interesting ones. We can maybe ask everybody to talk to their neighbors, and perhaps with their neighbors, try to agree on the 2 most important ones for us to talk about today. Once we do that, we narrow it down. We take a vote from the different groups. We've tried to reach some consensus, and we decide that there are 2 things we're going to talk about today. For example, in this case, maybe everyone decides, let's talk about large classes and assessment. Let's talk about engagement in multi-level classes. So yeah, and I love those because my first AE Live session was about those large classes. And so this is a topic I'll have fun with as well. Now, as we go forward, we've brainstormed a list of possibilities for our topic. All of these ideas came from the teachers who are in the room. So we know they're ready to talk about it. So what's the next step? The next step, of course, is to divide into teams. If we chose 2 most interesting problems, then let's make 2 teams. Each team will discuss solutions and actions for one of those problems. They'll work on it for a little while. Maybe we'll give them a particular time limit of 10 minutes or something like that. Maybe longer, it depends. But after that time has passed, it will be time for the teams to go to step 5, where they share their ideas with the group. Okay? As they share their ideas with the group is listening, and once the team finishes presenting, everyone else can respond. And naturally, there will be a discussion where we can seek consensus among the teachers about what kinds of solutions we feel are appropriate for our school. And we can talk about future actions. Is there anything that we need to do in the future as a school? Do we need more resources? Do we need someone to help us with something? Is there something we're going to try to fix? And this is all coming very organically from the teachers in the room. And obviously, there's a lot of connection that happens here and a lot of learning from one another throughout. Okay, so that's the idea with group problem solving. Next, I want to talk about a common activity that's used in language classrooms all the time, jigsaw activities. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with this as well. The idea here is that it's a way to facilitate collaboration and interactive learning. It's typically used with our students in an English class or any kind of class, really. But teachers can get similar benefits as they do it. They'll be collaborating, they'll be sharing knowledge, and they'll be doing it through these things like jigsaw activities. So the first step here you can see is we could start with a text. We might pick 4 simple readings on associated topics. We might pick 1 reading that has 4 distinct parts. For example, we might pick an article that offers a set of teaching tips that can easily be broken into pieces. Whatever it is, maybe 1 article broken into pieces, maybe 4 short articles, maybe 4 videos on YouTube that different people will watch. It doesn't have to be readings. Whatever it is, the next step is that we distribute these texts evenly so that each participant is responsible for reading only 1 of the 4 texts. So when you look at my example here, you see that I'm imagining working with a group of 8 teachers, right? And so if I have 8 teachers and 4 texts, that means that I make 2 copies of each text, and each member of the group will get 1 of those. So in the end, what happens is I've got 2 people reading text 1, 2 of them looking at number 2, 2 for number 3, and 2 for number 4. When we come together for our meeting, the first step will be to get those people together. So the people who have the same text will sit together, as we can see on the next slide. And as they sit together, they talk about what they read. They talk about, it can be very informal. They can talk about what stood out for you, what was interesting, what questions did you have, what made sense for you, what were you unsure about. There's all kinds of general questions we can ask about a text as we get started with it. Now, as the teachers talk about it, they've done this homework in advance, hopefully. And so they're helping each other reach a consensus on what that piece was about. And they're also reaching consensus on how that text is relevant to where they work. And so the next step is going to be to mix and represent what that text was about to people who have not read it. So that's the last step. We mix into new groups where each member of the new group leads a discussion of the text that they read. So remember, if I'm text 1 in this picture here, I'm going to talk about text 1, and the other 3 people in my group did not read that text. So they're going to be learning about it as I talk about it, and they'll naturally have some questions for me, and I can be kind of in charge of that part. This is an important part of collaborative learning or cooperative learning, this idea of interdependence, right? So one person has information that the other people need. Some teachers like to add another step to this by maybe providing a worksheet where people fill out some responses about what text 1 is about, what is text 2 about. Maybe there are some questions to answer that can also facilitate discussion and engagement. So Kate, I'm curious, is a jigsaw activity something that comes up a lot in these AE live sessions? Have you noticed other presenters talking about this very much?
Yeah, definitely. We've had a lot of presenters who talked about jigsaw activities for students. And so it's so exciting to see that you're talking about jigsaw activities for groups of teachers, and kind of brings us back to that idea that we were talking about earlier today about synchrony.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. It's so for teachers who are already familiar with this activity, they've got an extra level of learning happening. They're not just learning about the text, but they're also standing back and looking at what happens in a group when they are the one presenting to people who didn't read it. How do they feel when they're listening to someone else? All of these things can help a teacher become more effective when they use the jigsaw activity themselves. And as you said, Kate, it also leads to that kind of fun experience of, hey, we're pretending to be students here. This is kind of, I know how this works. And so it leads to some bonding and fun in some ways. Great. So in short, jigsaws are a great way to facilitate enjoyable collaboration and help teachers learn through interaction. Beyond that, one of the most powerful ways to learn from other teachers is, as you said already, to visit other classrooms. So that's the last practical example I want to talk about in a little more detail. And I'm going to talk about lesson study. Now, there are many, many different ways to do classroom observation. You could be a team teacher watching your colleague side by side. You could be doing peer observation, where you just visit someone and try to help them with something or learn from them. But lesson study is different. With lesson study, one nice thing here is it's very good for teachers who might not be comfortable being observed. Sometimes, as you said, we might feel nervous or self-conscious or unnatural about it. But with lesson study, we might feel just a little bit more comfortable because the point is not actually about the teacher. The point is about the lesson. So what we do is we focus on a lesson. The first step is that a team of teachers develops a lesson that is useful for all of their classes. So when I tried this with colleagues of mine a while back in Japan, we all agreed that we wanted to be better about using videos in our classes, showing a video and then helping students learn from that video. So together, we tried to think of a way to make an ideal video lesson. So I worked with my colleagues, we developed a lesson, we chose a video, we chose the activities, but we all made that lesson together. And so that made the observation part really special and unique. And that's step two. In step two, one of the people in my group taught the lesson, and everyone else in that teacher group sat in the back observing. Now, when they were observing, it wasn't a situation so much of judging the teacher and thinking of feedback for the teacher about how they could be better. It was about the lesson that we had all made together. And it was about saying, that part seems to work, but I think the students really don't understand the worksheet. We need to fix that worksheet. And do you see how it changes from a perspective of what is the teacher doing right to what did we, our team, do right in the lesson that we made together? So after the observation happens, the next step is that the teachers get together and they have a kind of debrief. They think about the lesson that they did together and they discuss it and they talk about refinements. They say, I think the video was perfect, maybe a little long. Next time, maybe we can try to make it shorter and cut out this part. And I saw some parts here in the handout, we can fix that maybe. And I wonder what happens if we change the order, right? We can have all these kinds of conversations with our colleagues in the team for the lesson study, and we try to make a better lesson. What do we do next after we make a better lesson? Well, we teach it again. If I was the first one to teach, then maybe I'm off the hook. It goes to the next person. And the next person in our group will teach it for their classes. All right, so we keep doing it. We repeat steps 2 and 3 until the group is satisfied with the lesson. Now, again, because the lesson is focused on, the observation is focused more on the lesson than the teacher, we might be more comfortable about it. All right, so that brings us to the end of my presentation. I'd like to summarize things a little bit here by saying that as we talk about teachers learning with other teachers, there are some key principles we might keep in mind. One is the importance of finding ways to hold activities that will bring teachers together through specific goals, by exercising different kinds of leadership, and by addressing common obstacles like time and hunger and disconnection. If we have a healthy network, and if we nurture our interest in other people, recognizing the value in the people we've already gotten to know, that's going to help us contact people to bring together in the first place. As we get together with teachers, it's important to remember the power of collaborating, using inclusive discussion techniques, visiting classrooms and learning from other teachers, and seizing existing opportunities like talking to people next to us before a faculty meeting. And the other thing I want to leave you with is that image of the egg carton. So once again, the idea here is that if we think of the egg carton on the next slide, we think about teachers and how they go to separate classrooms, and they're often kind of isolated in their separate classrooms. It's not necessarily a natural thing for teachers to go into one another's classrooms and learn about what's happening there. It's very isolated and separated. But if we build our network, we can break out of that. We can observe each other. We can talk to each other more and learn from each other. And as we do that, we can spread happiness, right? Relationships increase our access to opportunities. They allow us to expand our knowledge. They help us develop as professionals. They contribute to our health. In short, they increase our happiness. So these relationships can help us continue to be effective and enthusiastic teachers. So as we build networks and help teachers connect with one another, we increase everyone's satisfaction and we make a powerful contribution to the field. So I hope everyone, if you're not thinking about this already, I hope you'll think about it, or if you already are, think about it even more. And I want to say thank you for joining us today. It's been really nice hearing your comments or seeing your comments. I'm leaving my email on my last slide here. I'm glad to hear more comments and questions from you. And just really, thanks for everything today. You've totally increased my happiness.
Thank you so much, Chris, for that wonderful presentation on connecting to other teachers and learning from other teachers, both inside and outside of our classrooms and schools, and both virtually and in person. So thank you so much for that wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Kate.
And as always, we want to thank you, our wonderful audience, for your participation and your enthusiastic questions, comments, suggestions, ideas. We're so happy to have each and every one of you here with us today. And we're so happy that we can sort of think about ways that we can expand our communities in person and virtually.